Okay, I want to thank everybody for coming out today, and also I want to thank everybody that is watching here for this big day for us as we talk about implementing our climate action plan. It's obviously been a long time coming that we've talked about not just the creation of our plan, but also how we're going to go about the difficult process of implementing it. I also, before I say anything else, I do want to acknowledge we have two city council people here with us. Councilwoman Kwiatek and Councilman Wilhelm have joined us here as well. And I think one of the things that we're going to talk about today, as we're going to talk about how we're going to implement this, is the idea that this really is a community effort. It's not just the administration or city council or citizens, but it is all of us together. It's the one phrase that we use over and over again, is that what we try to do is get as many people in the same room as possible, virtually or physically, working on the same goals and priorities. And the Climate Action Plan is a great example of that. We've talked about it before. Over 700 people participated in that the organization of the plan and the writing of the plan, over 50 institutions. Since we took office in January, one of the things that we've been talking about is basically, how are we going to go about implementing that plan? Obviously, anytime you come up with any type of plan, the question is like, well, what are you going to do with it? And the Climate Action Plan, from a kind of intellectual point of view, is tougher than most because you have all of these different areas. The same challenges that we had when it came time to writing the plan or putting it together, whether or not it's transportation or energy usage or education or whatever different categories we have. It's how are we able to basically put something together that encapsulates all of those different things that need to go into this idea of a climate action plan or a sustainable pathway forward for Bethlehem. And we were able to do that. It took us a while. The planning process was not a short one. This is obviously a huge task that we undertook. And what we're going to talk about today, and I'm going to talk for a couple of minutes here, and then I'm going to turn it over to the different people that are running our internal implementation committees to kind of talk about how we are going to implement the different areas throughout the city. So the most important priority, as you see up on the board, that came out of that climate action plan is creating that kind of permanent structure or that permanent institutional accountability to make sure that we are following through on the goals and the policies and all the work that we did. It's not something you can just pass an ordinance about. It's not something you can come and say, hey, we did this on Thursday night and now we're good. You essentially need to start all these different trains and start sending them in the same direction. And then as the years go on, as federal regulations change and possibly, the state takes a more active role in this area or not, it allows us to adjust what we're doing on a local level. And part of that is establishing that governance to be able to be flexible. So one of the things that we wanted to do today is just talk about how that flexibility is going to occur with all of our implementation committees and just within the city administration as well. So if you take a look here up at the screen, we have, just kind of a little brief review here of what we've done since we took office in January. So as the Climate Action Plan called for, we established this kind of internal working group to create that institutional accountability. We put together these implementation committees, 9 different ones, to reflect kind of the 9 different sections of the Climate Action Plan to create this strategic framework to address the implementation goals. Some goals, as you're going to see, are things that we can do in year 1. Some of them are going to take years to accomplish. And by nature, some of them you never really accomplish. You are always working towards that particular goal. One thing that came up during the Climate Action Plan process, and that planning process a lot, was the idea that the most value we can create is just create this group of people here, this group of people that are watching, that are engaged, that know the Climate Action Plan is a thing, that know sustainability is a thing. So no matter what happens in the future, we're able to be responsive. So as we're going to talk about those implementation committees made up of City Hall staff and council members, as well as WSP, who has a few representatives here today who are providing institutional support in 2022, and also were the co-creators and the co-authors of the Climate Action Plan. A Bethlehem-based firm with Bethlehem residents that have really been working with the community over the past couple of years to get this plan that we have now. And, It's an award-winning plan. We have won statewide awards for this plan, and that's not something that our administration deserves credit for, even previous administration, but our community, because it's something that we've done with that partnership with Bethlehem School District, the Chamber of Commerce, so many citizens, our Environmental Advisory Council, that's gotten us to this place here. So the last slide I'm going to talk about here before I turn over to the implementation committee kind of chair people to talk about it are these different areas here of the CAP that we're going to have. And there's 9. And one of the things that came out when we went through this planning process was just how passionate people are about different areas. So some people really, really care about what are we doing about electricity sourcing. Other people have strong feelings on transportation. So what we've been trying to do is establish this framework going forward so that both in the short term and the long term, no matter what your particular interest is or your institution's interest, that there is a way that we are both allowing you to be part of the process, to be helping to kind of move us forward, and also addressing all of those different things that add up to the idea of sustainability. So I don't want to take too much of the information away from the different presenters here, but one thing I do want to say is one thing you're going to see in these 9 different areas is that some have more room for public engagement than others. Some of them are very kind of internally based as far as a city hall kind of workflow. And then others, the whole point of them is that type of community engagement and education. So that's one concept that I'll be talking about when I come back up at the end to talk for 2 minutes afterwards. But I do want to get into some of what the implementation committees are going to be doing. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to our first speaker, which is Janine Santoro, who is leading up our Environmental Justice and Equity Implementation Committee.
So before we talk about our year 1 goals, I just want to say that this climate action plan is special in the sense that environmental justice and equity is not only something that's included in this plan as an aside or kind of in its own silo, but rather it's the very lens that we're looking through as we begin to advise and work alongside every committee that you're going to be hearing from today. The spirit of environmental justice that we're seeking to create is not just looking for any kind of solution, but equitable solutions to the impacts of climate change, since we know that it disproportionately affects our BIPOC and low-income residents. And we know that this plan, within this plan, we dub these communities as frontline communities, since they often experience the first and worst effects of climate change. So it's through this lens that we both acknowledge and seek to remediate the environmental racism that has taken place in the past through practices such as, but not limited to, redlining, that even if you argue no longer exist, still contribute to the lack of options and social mobility of our frontline communities and worsen our affordable housing crisis, include an increased food insecurity, create further health disparities, and so much more. So environmental justice is not just about seeing all these issues as separate things, but they are interconnected, and we're not just dealing with issues. We are really rather deliberately caring for people in the midst of a climate crisis. So as the background for our year 1 goals in front of you, we want to communicate that while these things are happening and they seem like very tangible things, there are going to be some really important conversations happening in the background throughout this year. So these conversations are going to revolve around the city's commitment to creating long-term ethical framework, which will be our climate and environmental justice plan. It will inform our efforts to avoid further gentrification that is caused by often well-intentioned climate action implementation of initiatives. And this framework will be created by representatives from the frontline communities who speak for themselves and whose lived experiences serve as the expertise to help us ensure that our 40% of overall benefits to the city spending go towards our frontline communities. It's going to inform the way we work in conjunction with the EAC, the Environmental Advisory Council, to determine if proposed projects might have negative effects on our most vulnerable, and help us to begin to codify environmental justice considerations into city ordinances and planning zoning decisions. In addition, it's also going to help create an apprenticeship program, which gives youth an opportunity to obtain training from city staff hired to implement our CAP strategies. And it's going to ensure that our future projects include hiring people from the communities that they represent. So what you see here are some year one objectives, which are tangible things that we can do while we're having these conversations in 2022 and maintain them intentionally over the years to come. And these goals came out of conversations with just of our beginning conversations with Climate and Environmental Justice Group and the individuals who consist of folks in our nonprofit sectors, in education, city council, especially with Rachel Leon, and our residents. And so some of our goals, as you see here, are to maintain community green spaces and plant native plants to combat local pollution, intentionally promote existing initiatives that impact frontline communities, such as the Health Bureau's Lead and Healthy Homes program, ask developers to plant appropriate trees when they start new construction, create shade structures in existing parks to increase cooling and reduce incidences of heat strokes and heat exhaustion as temperatures continue to rise and natural shading is sparse, to strengthen partnerships and providing access to healthy foods and access to fresh produce in food deserts. And finally, to collaborate intentionally with Bethlehem Area School District to engage with students about environmental justice in age-appropriate, meaningful ways, to show the interconnectedness of both caring for the environment and caring for people at the same time. So to introduce someone that's such a key part in our environmental justice work that we're doing, here's Matt Dorner to talk about municipal operations.
Hello, everyone. Like everyone else on these committees, we have a lot of goals. So we're just going to talk about a few that are priorities for us in the upcoming years. Municipal operations, continuing to purchase 100% renewable electricity for all municipal operations. A lot of people may not know that, but we've been doing that for several years now. But we're going to take a look at it and see if we can make improvements. Looking at different sources of that renewable electricity, maybe more localized. And we can also look into something called a power purchase agreement that could support installation of new facilities that generate renewable electricity and would be directly sold to the city. Continuing to invest in energy efficiency projects. For years, we've been looking at all our improvements and looking for opportunities to improve efficiency. Over the last few years, some of the projects we've done, we've replaced an old chiller with a new one that uses 50% less electricity and is more reliable, has redundant motors, and a much better product. In addition, we have replaced and upgraded 2 cooling towers, domestic hot water heater, constant temperature pumps, mini split air conditioners, and fan coils. And we certainly have many more opportunities that we're going to pursue. And our next category is kind of leading into that. Our 5-year capital plan, where we identify specific projects that we are going to undertake in the next 5 years and start taking care of funding for those projects. So we're going to continue to look at that. Some of the things on our current 5-year plan include replacement of a boiler, domestic water tank, we replaced a lot of windows here at City Hall, but there still are some left. We want to finish that. And we're looking at another much more efficient chiller to replace another one of our old ones. All the equipment that we get will obviously be significantly more efficient and help with our goals. We want to establish a formal plan for the city to consider energy efficiency as a part of any project. We're working to establish an internal process whereby we kind of take a step back and look at all projects and processes that we have going in the city and look for opportunities to add energy improvements to those projects. This would include looking at ways to include energy improvements, solar generation, or other upgrades in projects and activities that aren't obvious energy efficiency projects. Maintenance procedures will also be something we'll look at, see where we can improve maybe equipment that we have, equipment we use to be more efficient and safer for the environment. Creating an Office of Sustainability and Director of Sustainability for the city is a big goal of ours. This would be a very important step in helping to continue all these goals we have in our climate action plan. There's many important tasks that this person and this department would handle, including implementation of many policies and programs to support the CAP, tracking our progress and goals and helping to report that, and seeking sources of grant funding to continue with many projects we hope to move ahead with. Also, we want to continue to lead by example and provide a testing ground for strategies that can be scaled to the rest of the community. The city created the CAP, and we're committed to implementing the plans and goals that are in it. As we achieve these goals and implement the strategies, we want to report this to the community, let them know what's being done, because the CAP is not just for municipal operations, as is this category, but it's for the city of Bethlehem as a whole. And we want to explore opportunities to pilot strategies to determine effectiveness of all these different strategies, and appropriate improvements can be scaled to use by the public. Last among these current priorities, investigate opportunities for further native plantings and solar installations. Obviously, that's something we want to prioritize wherever we can, whenever possible. We'll look at opportunities to include those types of improvements in other projects and other activities that we're implementing. And we're going to continue to partner with some great groups, including the Bethlehem EAC and the Monocacy Creek Watershed Association, who are both helping to promote those types of improvements. Our next committee is buildings. I'm also going to give you a rundown on some of the priorities that we're working on there. First priority is create benchmarking requirement for government buildings. We have been tracking our municipal energy use for several years now, and we're going to look to initiate a public disclosure of our energy use to the public for all of our buildings. And we want to be benchmarking for commercial and multifamily buildings in the future. That's a goal of ours. But it seems appropriate that the city takes the lead and we start by reporting our use to the public. And leading into the next category, developing benchmarking requirements for commercial and multifamily buildings. That would certainly be a follow-up step from the public disclosure. Reporting energy use in the private sector could encourage property owners to make energy efficiency upgrades. Property buyers and renters would use that information to make decisions on what's the best place to buy or rent for them. And we would hopefully be able to provide workshops and webinars to help building owners and property managers reduce the uncertainty about this whole process. Another priority is to support residential property assessed clean energy, RPACE. The city can pursue a resolution or other means of support for the RPACE program in Pennsylvania. This program would provide homeowners with 100% long-term financing for energy efficiency upgrades and renewable energy installations. This program has been in place for years, and it's developing, and hopefully we can work with our state legislatures to help promote that, keep that going, and keep that improving. We also want to initiate or expand upon residential energy efficiency programs, especially those serving low-income communities. The city can partner with our local utility companies and other groups to expand energy efficiency programs. Programs such as the Weatherization Assistance Program helps benefit low-income residents with improvements that will save energy and save them money. Public outreach to inform the residents of all these different programs that are out there that they may not all be aware of. Also, we want to partner with utilities to increase awareness of opportunities for energy audits, incentives for energy efficiency improvements, and other energy saving measures. So along with the previous goal that we just talked about, this effort would raise awareness and stimulate energy efficiency improvements throughout the community. PP&L and other utilities have existing programs, and we just wanted to help raise awareness for everyone of where these programs are, help point them in the right direction, and hopefully spur action by many members of the community. There's rebate and incentive programs that also exist that can help residents and businesses. Thank you.
Okay, well, Dan Sabrinsky here with WSP. Just to build on what the mayor said earlier, is we are delighted to be a partner with the city and developing the climate action plan and now implementing the climate action plan. But really what makes us so excited is the enthusiasm we've seen from the community. all throughout this process of developing the plan and now implementing it. There's just been such engagement across institutional, residential, just engagement that we see as necessary to really activate what's in this plan. So we're going to talk a little bit about electricity sourcing. Why is that important? 50% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the climate action plan are from the result of electricity generation. So 50% is growing. The buildings, as we moved to electrify those, fossil fuels used in buildings, as you move to electrify our vehicles, our cars, our buses, we see electricity growing on its importance to managing greenhouse gas emissions. And managing greenhouse gas emissions is about trying to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. Those impacts are to people, to our economy. We know that, as Janine mentioned, they have real equity and justice challenges in front of them. So sourcing renewable electricity, sourcing affordable, reliable renewable electricity becomes an anchor to the climate action plan in a very important way. So with that, I just want to quick, before we move on to some of our year one objectives and focus, just say affordable matters in a broader context when we talk about this. When we think about affordable, we oftentimes do not think about that with a broad enough lens. And we think about affordable, we have to think about those long-term impacts of climate that are not there when we talk about what's the cost of electricity today. So taking a broader view, thinking about carbon pricing and different things of that sort will be a part of our year one objective, which is to disseminate educational materials on renewable electricity sourcing. What are those opportunities to source today? We can go to PA Power Switch. Those options are available to you right now when we source electricity, but what are the benefits? What are the costs in a broader costs when we talk about affordability? So trying to disseminate some of that information from the city, demonstrating the benefits of renewable energy through city initiatives. One of those that has been flagged is just to look at permitting. Look at permitting of installations with inside the city, both at residential scale and beyond residential scale. Where do we have opportunities to better activate those deployments of renewable energy in our city? And then broader change, supporting policy that is beyond the city. So state, federal level, where you see PA joining the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. That's an initiative that many of our Northeast states have long been involved in. This is to address decarbonizing the greenhouse gas emissions in the electric power sector. What just sort of this whole committee's focus is about. So we're going to be looking at how we signal those supports, how we communicate those broader systemic state and federal policies that will address some of these key sectors like electricity generation. So with that, I will pass this on to Darlene, who's going to talk to us about transportation.
Thank you. I'm Darlene Heller. I'm the Director of Planning and Zoning for the City of Bethlehem. And when we talk about planning, it's very broad in scope. I don't think there's anything that we do without community and regional partners in the work that we do. So I've been hearing people talk about partnerships throughout the presentation, and I'll be doing that myself as well. In the Transportation and Mobility Committee, one of the first things we wanted to talk about is enhancing Lanta bus service. Lanta has been a partner of ours. I see a couple of thumbs up back there. A partner of ours for years, really, for all of our plan reviews. Everything goes to Lanta, and they really provide great input for us. We want to continue that partnership. They are working on basically a South Side station, is what they're calling it, at the 3rd and Polk Street garage. And we are coordinating now with them with signage and shelters and things like that there. And that is a partnership that we plan to continue. But the Southside Station improvements will be something that we'll be seeing probably this calendar year. Encouraging and promoting alternate transportation methods is a pretty broad goal for us, but we really try to do that in all of our work. This past year, we had significant participation in the Broad Street Active Transportation Plan. We'll be talking about some additional ways to move forward with that plan in the coming year. But a plan like that really talks about getting a street, a main corridor that's safe for pedestrians, transit, bike riders, for everyone to use the street. So that kind of thing is the kind of work that we'll be doing as we move on with the committee in the future. Again, developing the Third and Polk Garage as a multimodal hub, accommodating cars, bikes, and pedestrian amenities. Steve's here from the Parking Authority. He's a part of our committee. This garage is going to be designed a little bit differently than some of the others. It's a garage that promotes mass transit. There'll be signage and route boards inside of the facility. There'll be 8 EV stations for alternate fuel vehicles. There's bike racks in there, sheltered bike racks and bike racks on the outside. It's also going to be designed with sustainable design standards, which will be the first garage to be designed in that way. And they're looking to follow Park Smart certification, which is also a first step for the Parking Authority with this garage. We also look to enhance the Bike Bethlehem program. I don't see anyone from the Health Bureau here, but they're really the drivers for that program. It started several years ago. I think the Bike Bethlehem program, it's a bike share program. It's slowed down for the last couple of years because of the pandemic. But in this calendar year, we'll be working on marketing and just getting the word out so that more and more people are aware that the bike share program is available. One of the main stops is right next door at the library, and they do see a lot of activity during the summer months. Provide safe routes for pedestrians in and around town. Safe routes is a term that was started to be used with grants for safe routes to school, but now we just use that safe routes generally. We are working now with the Northside 2027 committee to really do some what are we calling those? Walkability audits. Thank you very much. And so that's so that the committee can really go out and walk the neighborhood. What we need to do is set up the priorities for where do we need to do some infrastructure improvements, better signage, crosswalks, whatever it might be. And so those are being scheduled for the spring and early summer so that we could set some priorities. And that leads right into the next bullet point: develop an inventory of priority sidewalk and intersection improvements in targeted areas. And pedestrian safety is one of the main priorities for Northside 2027, and that's the first step in how we plan to attack that. And then finally, finalize and adopt a complete streets policy. The complete streets policy is really a policy that's designed and to operate and enable safe use of our streets, our public streets, for everyone, for bicyclists, for pedestrian, for the disabled, for vehicles, for everyone, really. So the complete streets policy would really be setting up a commitment that as we improve streets, as we look at street improvements, we would be looking at those improvements with a lens toward looking at all users of our public street corridors. I'm going to talk a little bit about our next committee as well, land use and green space. We have been working for quite some time, frankly, to be updating our subdivision and land development ordinance. It's not a small task. We've been working on it for quite a while. But our latest initiative is to take the recommendations of the CAP plan and make sure that they are incorporated in the subdivision land development ordinance before we move too far along with adopting that. Rob Mlosky's here. He's the chair of our planning commission, and the planning commission has taken a look at this a couple of times now, but we have other drafts to do to move that forward. But that's our main push for this first bullet: review and update land use ordinance and zoning to encourage land use patterns that mitigate climate change impacts. Really, every component of the CAP is addressed in the subdivision land development ordinance in some way. there's a lot of broad strokes in that. So you'll be seeing that in the coming months as we start to introduce that publicly and as the Planning Commission continues its review. The second is to review new developments through the lens of sustainability via a recommending body. And again, this is one of our partners. The EAC has been mentioned before. Lynn is here. I believe she's the chair of that committee, but they have been reviewing our land development plans for some time now, offering good, thoughtful, practical recommendations for new development in the city. Some of those recommendations we'll start to incorporate into our ordinance so that they're more than recommendations in the future. But at this point in time, EAC is really our conduit to get some of those recommendations before new land development proposals. And the third one is to prioritize green space development in underserved areas. And we've been trying to do that with our initiatives for parks improvements. We're working now with Northside 2027 to get some proposals for redesign of Friendship Park. It's one of our urban parks that has an awful lot of impervious coverage, very limited shade. It's heavily used by the community, but definitely it needs some improvement. Another initiative we've been working on for the last several years is to create more of a trail network and connect our trails. So we've been working on the northern end of the Monocacy Way Trail, not quite finished yet, but will be finished this calendar year. And we've just applied for some grant funding to complete the southern end so that we would be able to continue the Monocacy Way Trail down to make a connection with the Delaware and Lehigh National Heritage Corridor. So we try to concentrate our efforts, our larger scope efforts, to those that are in the urban core, and so that we can create more green space in the city and then provide those connections to get to other green space in regional parks. I'm going to turn it over now to Alicia Carner, who's going to talk about the Local Food and Waste Committee.
Thank you, Darlene. The goal of the Local Food and Waste Committee is a pretty bold goal. It is to achieve zero waste to landfills by the year 2040. This involves looking at our product use comprehensively. The city has long been a leader in our composting and recycling efforts. The state looks to us to lead the way for other communities with our recycling center. But we need to tackle this issue at the beginning of product development, what we're consuming, how it gets to us, and then what happens after we use it. So goals include to adopt a reduce first approach and minimize waste, maximize waste diversion from landfills, develop better tracking and understanding of Bethlehem's waste streams. We know that we struggle to understand with our 20 haulers where our product goes, reduce the current impact of this system, and then enhance the local food system. So when looking at our first year goals, we want to look to eliminate food insecurity and inequity in food access. We saw last year what happens when a grocery store closes in a low-income community, and ensuring that all populations of the city have access to food is a priority of the committee. We want to facilitate conversations with large event organizers in the city about implementing zero waste practices for large festivals. We are a great community at reusing our mugs. We've been doing that for decades, but what else can we do to eliminate any waste associated with the large events that bring lots of people to the city of Bethlehem? Developing that better understanding of our waste stream is critical. We have lots of trucks that travel the roads every day, lots of different haulers to pick up trash on your street. So better understanding that waste stream is a priority of this committee. Conducting a public education campaign to improve waste management practices so that folks know what happens with their waste. Continuing to coordinate with the Lehigh Valley Food Policy Council's local gardens and urban farms subcommittee to implement initiatives. We've got a lot of local groups in Bethlehem, but we can strengthen the activities. Continue the farm stand at City Hall with a CSA option. We also support other farmers markets throughout Bethlehem, including the Southside Farmers Market and the work of the Kellen Foundation. And then to coordinate and continue to coordinate with the Lehigh Valley Food Policy Council's food recovery and respect and food access subcommittees to implement initiatives. So the partnerships that you've heard others talk about, this committee is committed to as well. At this time, I'll turn it over to Angie for public engagement.
Hi, everyone. Angie Del Grasso, Director of Mayor's Initiatives, and taking lead on 2 subcommittees here. So starting with Public Engagement Implementation Committee. Our biggest goal of the year is to create the Bethlehem Climate Challenge with goals and priorities for several different sectors of our community members, including residents, small business owners and organizations, restaurants and grocery, and then our large organizations. So instead of just forming one big Bethlehem Climate Challenge where everyone gets that same checklist, it'll look different for each sector of our community. And we want everyone to feel like they can have a part in this challenge. So stay tuned. That will be coming very soon. We'll have a big launch event to kick off that challenge where you can all have a hand in moving this climate action plan forward. We also look to promote our climate action plan information throughout the city using this committee as the hub of all promotional communication. So really think of this Public Engagement Implementation Committee as the climate action plan's marketing department. So with all of these other implementation committees that you've heard from today, as they do their work and want to communicate out to the public, passing it through this subcommittee to make sure that we have clear messaging, transparency, and constant updates going out to our community members. Partnering with Environmental Justice Committee is just one example of that. So you heard Janine talk about going into our school district, the different schools, and communicating with the kids and coming up with fun learning opportunities. So that is an example of where our Public Engagement Implementation Committee would partner. So that's just one example of the different ways that we'll be partnering with our several different committees. Utilizing existing platforms to promote the climate action plan and provide updates to the public. So there's already so many different platforms that we can be using to make sure we're sharing this information on social media, our newsletter that gets mailed out citywide twice a year, our e-newsletter, What's Going On in Bethlehem, that goes out weekly, and our website. Moving on to large organizations and institutions is the other implementation committee I'm taking lead on. First and biggest is to create the Bethlehem Green Ribbon Commission. So what that is we'll be looking at all of our different external partners in the community. Many of you were part of forming this climate action plan. We don't want that partnership to end there. We want to engage you moving forward. And we're really excited to continue that partnership, work with our partnered organizations throughout Bethlehem and the Lehigh Valley as we move forward in implementation. And then promoting participation in that Bethlehem Climate Challenge. So again, there will be one sector of that Bethlehem Climate Challenge that is geared at our large organizations and institutions for how each of those organizations and institutions can start checking things off the list to move us forward as a city. And that is everything for me. I'm going to turn it back over to Mayor Reynolds.
So just a couple things here before we wrap up. So kind of how do we summarize what we're looking at here as far as implementation going forward? As Angie had said and others had talked about, there are going to be individual implementation committee kickoff events as the year goes on. There also might be public meetings where it might be a planning commission meeting or something along those lines, where it is going to be an opportunity for people to come out to necessarily show support for some of these changes that we're talking about. One of the other things that we are developing in the mayor's office, you've probably seen our We Build Bethlehem pandemic recovery plan. We are also using that same software currently to try to build a platform that will allow people to follow the progress that we're making in all of these different implementation committees as the months and years go on. And then one of the things that we are going to utilize as well as an administration is public updates at our environmental advisory committee meetings, which are every month, the first Thursday of the month. I believe that they are virtual now, but they are going back to in person in the near future. So one of the things that this has really been designed to do, and as we've gone on for 40 minutes or so here, is there's been a lot of very dense and detailed updates here. by design. You know, a lot of times our emotion or our passion brings us to define problems or brings us to the conversation, but this is what change looks like. This is what change is often a grind, changes day to day. And what you saw today, and I really do want to thank Janine and Matt and Dan and Darlene and Alicia and Angie for coming up and talking about all of the impressive work that they're doing and all of the people that are on their committees. Many of them are city employees who have just added this as a responsibility onto other things that they are doing. And if you listen to any of those 6 speakers, what you see is and it's clear in the way they present, the way they're talking about, is this something that they feel very, very serious about. And the way that we are going to be able to implement this is not anything that just happens on the second floor, or even just in City Hall. We do have community partners here, as we said before. Lynn Rothman from our EAC. We do have Rob Miloski from our Planning Commission. I see Chief of Staff to State Senator Lisa Boscola, Joe Kelly here as well. Like, it is going to take every aspect of the public realm, as well as our private businesses, as far as our community, to be able to create this change. Because those daily victories, that grind of change is what adds up, and it adds up. And day after day after day, we look back a month, 6 months, a year, 2 years from now, and we can tell a story. You can't talk about this change in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. It takes 40 minutes to go through all these different implementation committees. And trust me, we could have told any of these people that are running these committees to talk for an hour about what their committee's been doing, and they would be able to do that. It really, really is an exciting time when we take a look at sustainability. When we look around at what other cities are doing in this realm, we are far ahead of them. And one of the things that came up in this process too is a lot of things that are good for the world, that are good for our state, good for our country, as far as the climate and environment are concerned, are the same things that make people want to live in the city of Bethlehem. They create an urban area where people want to live. So as I said, I want to thank everybody for participating in this process. This truly is an exciting day for us as we kick off these implementation committees. And as I said, we have, our future is bright when it comes to sustainability in Bethlehem. So thank you.